Bro, ça tue, ça blesse, ça flingue. Hey, 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 bro.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bench Mob ENT podcast, the best sports podcast in New Jersey. We have again another episode, another installment of Mondays with Chris Lindsey Hoops. On this episode, we're going to be knocking down the 2000s decade, which is one of my favorite decades. A lot of people talk about the 90s and call that the golden era, but post Jordan, it was a lot of good bump. But before we get into that, my guy, my bro, how are you doing?
Tone, what's good, champion? I'm chilling, bro. It's off season right now. Just chilling. It's August. We still got a lot of things to get through. So, we're going to give everybody some nostalgia today. We're going to be in our bag today. You know what I mean?
1,000%. And I know on Threads, Trayvon said, yo, some basketball podcast should take a break. It's okay because it's the dead period. But nah, this is a lot of basketball still to talk about if you're doing stuff like this. Now, I know he was referencing. We're not gonna call no names out. But I know he was referencing when he was talking about some of y'all need to just take a break. Over on these parts, there's gonna be some good content, so no break is needed. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Trying to be here for a long time and a good time. And the way that we do that is that we educate the algorithm to let it know to push out this great content. Below, before we get started, make sure you comment for me. Comment your favorite team from the 2000s. What is your favorite team from that era, 2000 to 2010? Recapping a little bit of the 2000s real quick. The Lakers won 5 titles in that decade, which is wild. That's half of the decade. The Lakers won half of that decade. The Spurs, they won 3 times, and the Pistons and the Heat cover up that final of the 10 years right there. Obviously, we have in that year superstar duels in that decade: Kobe, Shaq, LeBron, D Wade later. We talking about LeBron's early years. Dirk and Yao Ming during that era helped solidify and push the NBA as a global brand, being that they were at the top of their games. And in that decade, just throw a little stat out, the 2 top scorers in that decade: Kobe Bryant with 21,065 points in that span. Second most was Allen Iverson with 19,154 in a decade span. That's a lot of buckets, and especially in that era where you had some teams where we gonna play lockup defense and was still kind of a little bit of 90s basketball was still coming into 2000s where you had the Pistons teams and some of those Pacers teams, holding teams. So literally, I was looking at it the other day, getting ready for the show. 62-57 was final games. 62-57. There was games in this decade that was 62-57. So we definitely still had a different clash of play styles. We start to see obviously more scoring happening, but there is still definitely some teams focused on defense. We're going to start off, especially since we already here, the team aspect. Who comes to mind for you as some of the underrated, underappreciated teams of the 2000s?
Let's see. I got 5 that came to mind. If that's cool, I'm gonna go 5. Let me ISO real quick. So number 1, I got the 02-03 Dallas Mavericks. So they went 60-22 that year, which was kind of crazy because if I'm not mistaken, that was tied with the best record in the West. But since they played in the same division as the Spurs, they had to get the 3 seed, which was kind of crazy. But that was the last year you had Steve Nash and Dirk. I think they started the season out really strong, if I'm not mistaken, streak, and they looked like they were unbeatable. They were the next team that were on the way up. Second, I have the 04-05 Suns, which was the following year. Steve Nash, his first year in Dallas, which was, in Phoenix, rather. My bad. Yeah, his first season in Phoenix. I mean, they were a bad team, 62-20. He wins MVP, but they didn't get the championship. The 06-07 Bulls. I think that was good. They were like the young Bulls. They knocked off the defending champion Miami Heat in that first round. They swept them. Obviously, the Heat were pretty hurt and banged up, but still, they were close to winning 50 games that year. You had Ben Gordon, and you still had Luol Deng, and you had a mix of guys that were all there that it just worked, which was really good. The 07-08 Hornets, where they had Chris Paul, Peja, I believe Tyson Chandler was on that team. David West was there. I believe Chris Paul finished third in MVP that year, and that was maybe like his third year in the NBA. So that's when he kind of arrived, and everybody knew that he was a legit threat out west. And then also the 06-07 Mavs, 3 games away from winning 70, Dirk's MVP year, but we all know how that ended. So yeah, those are the 5 teams that kind of come to mind.
So that year that you mentioned, wow, that was his highest rated finish. He was actually top 2 in MVP finishing the 07-08 year.
Oh, top 2. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew he was up there or something like that. And I just remember that whole time. Remember the Rockets won 22 straight that year or something crazy. They went on a crazy win streak. The Lakers were still kind of battling for first. It was like the Lakers, the Spurs, the Rockets, and the Hornets. They were all just like teetering. I think the highest that they won was like the Lakers. I think they won like 57 or 58 games that year. And that was the max that you could win out west. So it was a gauntlet out there for sure.
56-26 that year.
56
first
okay.
For the Hornets. Yeah, 56-26, first in their division. Lost in the semifinals against the Spurs, and I remember that series. He had that. Ain't that the series where he had the game winner, kind of like over the shoulder, and he had to throw it.
So that was when he played the Clippers in 2015.
Clippers.
So this is, I believe, the one where he. Oh no, that would have been the year before. This is when in the first round of the playoffs when they beat Dallas, they tore Dallas up, and then when he was dribbling and he threw the ball between, I think it was Jason Kidd's or Jason Terry or something like that on a fast breaker. He was doing a lot that year. Chris Paul was doing it up. So yeah, that team was fun, and they had Rasul Butler. Can't forget him. He was on that team as well. R.I.P.
Yo, this is why I like having you on the show. The knowledge that you have, bro, to just be able to pull from the artifacts right there. Yes, that first round was the Mavericks. That's who they played the first round. So literally he pulled it right back perfectly on that regard. Chris Paul, I just staying there. Before the injuries, man. Chris Paul don't get injured. I know we have it later in the show, what ifs and whatnot, but just in general, how much better or how much more respect do you think Chris Paul would have had if he never got injured? Because, like you said, he was doing a lot. That he was dunking when he first came in the league.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was a high draft pick. He lived up to the hype. He was able to take New Orleans when they went to Oklahoma City, and they were the New Orleans, Oklahoma City Hornets. His first year they had Katrina they had to deal with, and he came in as the ambassador and came in and took that team over, endeared himself to the fans, and he made them a winner. You know what I mean? The lob threat between him and Tyson, that just opened up their entire game. And they were a lot of fun to watch, especially with him on the fast break, and he was in debates of being the best guard in the league at the time up there with Nash, Parker, and then the new younger guys it was between him, Rondo, and D. Will. And it was like, which one of those 3 are the best, or who would you rather have at that time? And all 3 of those guys, crazy IQ, D. Will was more of the scorer, while those 2 were the facilitators, but it still takes an elite amount of skill to do that. But I think he would have gotten more respect. But I feel like a lot of people just didn't like him because of sometimes the on-court antics, and then you get the anti-Steph stuff, and then that whole fan base discredits a lot of stuff that what Chris Paul has done. And he made a lot of enemies on the way, but the ones who watched him in the mid-2000s know how dominant he was as a guard.
Most definitely, like you said, he's made some enemies, and Chris Paul to me is the player that you would love to have on your team, player that you would hate to play against. That's Chris Paul, and by any means necessary, literally is the way he plays to try to win games. He doesn't have any tattoos, as far as I know, but that would be something that I think would be a great tattoo for him. By any means necessary. My teams that I came up with, 01-02 Kings, 61 games they won that year. First seed in the West. Again, as a Lakers fan, I've talked about it before. Watching those games, I think the Kings, they beat the Lakers, they get a title. The Kings weren't fortunate to get to the finals. That team of C-Webb, Peja, those 2 alone. A lot of people sleep on Peja was, but they beat that Laker team I think they actually get to the finals and they win. You also being a Lakers fan, locked in. That game 6, do you think there's validity to the claims that it was rigged, being that the Lakers got 27 free throw attempts or something like that to 2?
I mean, I don't know. They end up winning the game. You know, it's in the past now. We 23 years removed. You know what I mean? In the time frame, in the time back then, I didn't know. You know what I mean? One thing that I was tricky about was the elbow Kobe gave Mike Bibby on the inbound, and like, you know, clearly in front of the ref's face. And he literally elbowed him and then backed up. And the ref was just like, you know what I mean? Which does look kind of crazy. But I mean, that series alone, one thing that I always say, people forget, Peja didn't play in that series at all until the last game in game 7 because he was hurt. So I feel like had he played through games 1 through 6, the Lakers probably would, because he would have spread the floor too much because of how they were dishing the ball and everything. But he didn't play much. You know, Turkaloo, that was like one of his series where he was able to kind of come in. You know, Scott Pollard didn't play, or Lawrence Funderburk and Mateen Cleaves. Those guys were playing, but Gerald Wallace was a rookie. He didn't play much, but he was still a part of the lineup. So Rick Adelman had a real small, tight leash on those guys. But Vlade was just doing whatever he wanted. But yeah, that was stressful. But I mean, if they didn't say it was bad, I mean, I guess it wasn't bad.
I think when you look at that series and the season overall, the Kings weren't a team that was attacking the basket often. They weren't a team that was putting pressure on the refs often. The Lakers did what they're supposed to do, and like you said, we're 2 decades removed from that. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it because people still to this day still talk about, yo, that lets me know the NBA is rigged. They wanted to make sure the Lakers got in it. Regardless of the
I
fact,
mean,
it was still a
hey,
game 7. They didn't show up that game 7.
in
Regardless of the
overtime,
fact.
and it had to go to overtime. So that's what I'm saying. But then I will say this about that series. Obviously, we get the Ori game winner in game 4, right? But everyone always forgets at halftime, Samaki Walker hit that half court shot that wasn't supposed to count, and he laced it. You know what I mean? And they counted it as 3 points. They even showed it in the telecast that it wasn't supposed to count, but at this time, they didn't go back and take away points and have replay review. So then you end up winning the game by 1 point or 2 points after the game winner. So it makes it kind of like those points would have equaled out and the Kings win. But then in game 5, I've always felt that was a moving screen from Chris Webber on the Mike Bibby game winner. That was a moving screen. And again, Derek Fisher was known for flopping at the time, more or less. And he sold it, but then they still had a clean look to kind of win the game. You know, Kobe had a clean look, and I know you missed it, but yeah, no, that was one of the series that just is engraved in my, like, I remember what I was wearing that day. Like, I remember running around. Yeah, it was a lot going on, man. It was a lot of pressure.
I remember exactly where I was at. A place where the fam was living. We was all watching it in the living room. I remember that clear as day. I remember that whole series, but just the Lakers runs of the Robert Horry game winners, the Derek Fisher game winner. I think that was against the Spurs, where it was like
Oh, in
0.3 seconds.
04. Yeah, in 0.4 seconds. Yeah, 2004.
Those are etched in my brain. I remember exactly where I was at. And again, my pops was a Lakers fan too. So we was Derek Fisher. Wild times. Lakers fan. We've had a lot of good memories in our era of living versus some fan bases ain't seen no winning when they've been alive, i.e. Knicks fans. Y'all ain't seen. I've seen championships and
That's great. That's a crazy stray. I mean, unless you like 55, 56 years old, then you probably seen something in the 70s, more or less, maybe.
I'm talking about our era.
Probably not even in.
I'm talking
our era.
Oh yeah, no. Y'all ain't seen no winning. So I've seen a couple chips in my day since I've been alive. So another team that dealt with the Lakers, just like we said in our 90s episode, the Bulls messed up a lot for teams, but it doesn't mean that these teams weren't good. That 03-04 Timberwolves team, KG, Zerbiak, Spreewell, no choking coaches, Spreewell, and Sam Cassell. People forget, like you mentioned, Sam Cassell, when they saw the Lakers, he was not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Who's to say Maybe they don't win the series, but it's not. What was it? 4-1. It's not. It's not.
I think they won that one in 6.
4-2. It was 4-2.
That was the Kareem Rush game when he hit all them threes.
He wasn't 100% in that series. So who's to say that?
Yeah.
You feel me? That doesn't impact, and maybe it goes to 7. Who's to say? That was a huge vital piece to their team. One of those players, when you talk about Sam Cassell, is one of those players that was a late bloomer, and it could have been a late bloomer in regards to opportunity. Sam with the Rockets had a title and whatnot, like, but didn't get the opportunity like he had to play like with the Timberwolves of being more of the focal guy till later on. Same with Chauncey Billups.
Yeah.
Maybe Billups was always like that, but it just wasn't the right situation where he was drafted. So
yeah,
shout out to Sam Cassell. I think that's a name that a lot of people don't bring up enough, of somebody that 19,000 plus points in his career and say over 6,000 assists. That ain't something you sneeze at.
and he got 3 rings. He got 3 of them. You know what I mean? 2-point Jesus, as they call him.
Literally. So, and Sam, we'll talk about it later, some of our underrated players, because he's one of mine that I got on my list. But other team that I will die on this hill. The 2004, the 2005 Pacers. If healthy, if no suspensions, they're winning the title that year. They just came off the 61 game win season the previous year. They sniffed it, got close, lost to the Pistons. I think they were more explosive than the Pistons, better scorers than the Pistons, and they was able to play defense. I like their roster way better than I like the Pistons roster. And doing the research, I didn't realize, because I remember as a kid, but I didn't remember exactly when it happened. Malice at the Palace happened in the 9th game of the season.
Yeah, it's like in November or something like that. It was in the very beginning of the season. That's why they were playing so early.
Beginning of the season, and that completely, and shout out to them, they still got 44 wins that year, but that completely changed the trajectory of that season. I feel if Master of the Palace does not happen, that roster with Jamal Tinsley, Steven Jackson, Reggie Miller, obviously Ron Artest, who was actually looking, go check out that season. They had a double overtime game to start the season. The man dropped 31. Ron Artest was getting this was Ron Artest, two-way player Ron Artest. That was this era where he was literally locked in. I'm getting 30 any given night. And your best player, I'm locking him up. And I was able to be physical. So Ron was bullying jokers to not go get I don't want to go in the paint. Ron down there, I don't want to go in the paint. And one of my favorite players all time, Jermaine O'Neal, also was on that team, two-way player as well. And I hated it because they wasn't able to get Reggie a ring. I think they would have got a ring, and Reggie gets a ring, and it's a little bit more respect put on his name, not all the smut that they put on the name of players that don't win a ring.
Right.
Reggie would have won. Just one. It completely changes how people talk about him as a player. We leave him as just, oh, he's one of the greatest shooters in the world. He was one of the greatest players. That era, 90s, 2000s, he was an overall really good player. Looking at the 01 season, right? Before we talk about some of our underrated players, looking at that 01 season, we know obviously the Sixers went against the Lakers. But on that pathway, we had a lot of historic basketball for the 76ers playing against the Bucks and the Raptors. That 50, the game with him and Vince Carter going back and forth, like a lot of history leading up to that. I want to ask you this, right? Do you think the Raptors or the Bucks would have been a better matchup for the Lakers?
Man, that actually is a tough one. I think the Bucks would have been the better matchup. I think they had a little, because if I'm not mistaken, I know that obviously they had Ray Allen, and then you still had Glenn Robinson was there. You had him doing it up, and that would have been a little bit tough for the Lakers. I know they had Irvin Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, as a center. I don't know if he was starting or anything. Yeah, that may have been probably one of the better matchups for them. It would have been a little bit more balanced potentially. You know what I mean? But at that point, there was still no answer for Shaquille. But then at least you still get kind of a bigger guard for Kobe to have to guard for himself in Ray Allen. And this is not just 3-point shooting Ray. This is slashing Ray. I'm pulling up. This was the Ray Allen with the hair. You know what I mean? This is Walter Ray Allen. You know what I'm saying? Where he was doing it up. So, but then if you look at the Raptors that year, I mean, Vince, you had JYD, Junkyard Dog, Jerome Williams. I believe Dale Curry was there. Muggsy Bogues, I think, was on that team. Alvin Williams. I think Mo Peterson. I think Mo Peterson was on that team, possibly. But they had a nice balanced team too, right? But at the end of the day, no one was going to stop Shaquille, and that was that was the biggest factor for everybody. And that was when Kobe had probably his best playoff series during that Kobe Shaq era. But they maybe would have, instead of 5 games, maybe it would have been 6. You count in travel, flying to, Toronto, got to go to customs, that could hold the jet plane up just a little bit more, right? You know what I mean? So Shaq could be a little bit more irritated and tired, which maybe in turn would have made him score more because now he's mad. You know what I mean? Who knows? But yeah, I think out of those 3 teams, it was either going to be a sweep or 5, honestly.
Yeah, I still don't think anybody beats the Lakers, but I just wonder, looking at that, especially on the path there, if either of those teams could have been a better matchup where maybe it goes to 6. Maybe if one of those 2 teams win game 1, they're able to actually put more fear into the Lakers. Like, obviously, we didn't expect to lose any games. They were undefeated up until that point.
Yeah.
But they still knew, all right, they won that first game, but I don't think there was any true fear in their heart that they was going to lose the series because there still was no answer for Shaq. But I think you looking at a team in the Bucks, for example, coached by George Karl, they won 52 games that year. As you mentioned, that's the different Ray that isn't just shooting in the corner. He had a top 11 MVP finish that year. Glenn Robinson, Tim Thomas, Sam Cassell, Lindsey Hunter, the good old hands in my pockets coach. Darvin Ham was on that roster.
Oh, yeah, he was.
You feel what I'm saying? Maybe they actually do 6. Maybe there's some fear in their hearts, especially with George Karl as the coach as well. Yeah, you had Larry Brown, but George Karl as a coach, maybe it's different. Versus Raptors had Muggsy Bogues, Vince Carter, Del Curry, as you said, Antonio Davis. Mark Jackson was on that roster as well. Morris Peterson, as you said, Mo Pete, Alvin Williams, and Jerome Williams. And you still had Corliss Williamson over there and Kevin Willis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Oh, Kevin Willis was there. That's right. He was one of their center. OG.
Yeah, so either team still loses, but I just wonder if it would have been a better matchup, especially as you mentioned, the smaller guard, AI respectfully, Aaron McKee, Eric Snow. That rotation, none of those 3 was doing anything with Kobe.
Raja Bell was there. He was trying. You know what I mean?
None of them was doing nothing at all with Kobe. But Ray Allen events, that might be a different thing. Maybe cancels him out. Ray drops 30. Maybe you see something like that. And sticking in that era of some stuff with the teams, right? 08-09 Cavs lost to the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic played the Lakers that year. That's the infamous Matt Barnes. I'm going to throw it in your face. Kobe didn't flinch. Which, shout out to Kobe. I would have just naturally flinched because it was pretty close to my face. They lose to the Lakers 4-1. Do you think that 09 Cleveland Cavaliers LeBron-led team would have been a better matchup to face that Lakers team of the Kobe and the Powell? And again, shout out to Kobe because the following year he said, Mac, come over here. Come play with me. But do you think that 08-09 Cavs team would have been a better matchup and possibly beats that Lakers team?
I think so. I think they would have probably been a better matchup. If you remember, Jameer Nelson was injured and they were starting Rafer Alston, Skip to Malou throughout that entire entirety of the playoffs because Jameer, I think, had a shoulder injury, if I'm not mistaken. So you have Mo Williams, who was an all-star that year. Obviously, he was a reserve, but he was there. But just the way that they were able to move the ball, and you got peak LeBron, not even peak. I mean, he's been still playing for so long, but you got like prime LeBron that's in there. You know what I mean? And I believe they still had a pretty stacked what they needed. I mean, you don't win that many games by accident being a bad team. It's just didn't work out for them matchup wise. And but yeah, I think that Cavs team probably would have been the better matchup for the Lakers, to where maybe the Mavericks could have won. I mean, not Mavs, Cavs. The Cavs could have won that one. You know what I mean? But the Lakers wouldn't have had an answer for LeBron at that time. And then having Derek Fisher trying to run around and chase Mo Williams. I mean, that would have been a lot of minutes for like Jordan Farmar and like guys like that, like a little bit younger legs. Like I'm sure Phil would have been able to figure it out and try to exploit some of the weaknesses potentially that the Cavs had. But I mean, they had a pretty balanced team that year, and that's when LeBron really started to kind of come into his own and get busy. But they didn't have an answer for Kobe. Obviously, they probably would have tried to cross match it a little bit and then tried to see who was going to guard him. But then it would have had to be LeBron versus Kobe at the end. And at that point in time, I didn't see anyone stopping Kobe at that point. I mean, even in the regular season when they played, I think the Lakers swept them that year. And Lamar Odom, they would have had to deal with him. And then Pau Gasol, Ilgauskas was still there. So what are you going to do with him? How's he going to play against Pau and Bynum, right? That two-man front. So, yeah, I still think the Lakers would have gotten it, but it would have been, instead of 5, maybe 6 or 7.
Looking at that series before he get there, he did everything that he could possibly to get to the finals, and that's the matchup that we all wanted to see was Bron against Kobe in the finals on the biggest stage, but it wasn't really on him. 38.5 points against the Magic that series, 8.3 boards, 8 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.2 blocks. He did everything he could to make the matchup happen to get there. 38.5 points is
that's ridiculous.
Bananas. And in that series, he had that 49-point game against the Magic. Just wasn't enough. Like you said, it was Mo Williams there. Delonte West, I think he would have been a nice piece. Zadrunas, obviously Anderson Varejao, and then Boobie Gibson. Then you still have maybe they would have been able to give some tips and they would have played him, and maybe he could have been able to tell them like how to defend Bynum and Gasol. But Ben Wallace was on that team. Maybe he helps with that. You had Wally Zerbiak, and of course, I don't know if people remember this name. I remember playing with him in 2K. Sasha Pavlovich.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he could shoot. Number 3. Yeah, he could shoot, man.
He can shoot the thing. Underrated players. Who's on your list for underrated players?
So I got 5 of them. First one that comes to mind, Josh Howard. When he played in Dallas, he was consistent for them. He was even an all-star, in 2007. He was real key for the Mavericks in that 06-07 season. Next one, I got Andre Karolinko, another one, two-way player. He would thrive in like today's game. I feel like he would be like one of the, like a really good match. He would be a matchup nightmare for a lot of guys because he was locking up. He had crazy energy, and he was long and athletic and lanky, and he could slash. He could shoot the mid range. So I got him. Another one, I got Kirk Heinrich. He was that was in the league at that time. Captain Kirk, shout out to him. And then I have Rip Hamilton, another one. He played with Michael Jordan one year, but then when he got to the Pistons, he was able to take his game to the next level and almost was a precursor to what we see with Steph, with the constant ball movement and just always moving around. He never was really injured. He was consistent. He defended at a high level the best he could, even though he was a slight frame player, but his IQ for the game and his feel was so good. And when you needed a clutch shot to be hit, he had no problem hitting that. And then the last one I'm gonna go is with Rashard Lewis. I feel like even his time when he was in Seattle, as a rookie, and then he, got his way up going in the 2000s with him and Ray and Vlad Rad and, Danny Fortson, Luke Ridnour. Like they had that nice little crew with the Sonics. And then, he goes to Orlando and he was key, kind of like going back to that 09 team. He was hitting game winners. He was lanky, athletic, 6'9" ish or so, could shoot over anybody. He could slash. I mean, he was an all-star during those years too. So yeah, Josh Howard, Andre Kirilenko, Kirk Heinrich, Rip Hamilton, and Rashard Lewis.
That's a solid list for sure. A lot of those names I like, especially the Rashard Lewis. That's one of those stretch fours, man. He could put the ball on the floor, but he would be able to play in this era. Rashard Lewis most definitely could play in this era. AK-47, in a sense, is like what you could heard with some of the comparisons for Cooper Flag. Like, and I think when people were saying that, because we are prisoners of the moment, because a lot of people do not know the history, or a lot of people didn't start watching basketball till recently, or whatever the reason is, took that as a slight. Andre Kirilenko could do whatever you wanted him to do on the floor. And if Cooper Flag can do that with this Mavericks team, that's actually elite. That's rookie of the year. That's great basketball. That's putting the Mavericks in a situation where, what? The Mavericks are the top 4 seed and Kyrie ain't play? That is where that can happen if Cooper Flag can immediately come in and is giving you 15 to 18 points. He's going to play defense, 1 to 2 blocks a game, a steal, again, with a man named Anthony Davis next to him, who also can do a little bit of everything. He's a better scorer, obviously. AD might give you 30 with the 15 boards, the 4 blocks, and 2 steals. And now with this team, he might give you 3-4 assists with Clay. Clay locked in. So just had to throw it out there because be seeing a lot of disrespect to AK-47. Andre Kirilenko was actually, please go watch the tape. The numbers don't do it any justice. Really, really good. My list, I'm going to throw out there. Baron Davis, one of the most explosive point guards. Easily any single night he was giving you 20, and he's alluded to it. He played on teams where he wasn't able to really get busy like point guards get busy now. I think Baron Davis plays in this era. Big body guard, super athletic, super explosive. He can average 20, 25 easy in this era of basketball. We knew he could drop 20, but he wasn't in that era and those teams. He wasn't able to do that consistently because that wasn't his role. Baron Davis, another good name out there. I'll put on my list as well. Captain Jack, before he was a podcaster, before he was threatening to fight people at the Big Three, on the court, dynamic point forward, could shoot the ball, could score in a myriad of ways. I think because going back, that Malice of the Palace, that overshadowed how good he was and kind of changed the trajectory of his career. Again, you get a title to your name. They have a title. We talk about Steven Jackson differently. I think his career after that goes differently as well. Mentioned him earlier. Ain't going to go too deep into it. Jermaine O'Neal. I love Jermaine O'Neal. Jermaine O'Neal's game. Two-way player. As y'all could tell, I really like that Pacers team that I mentioned. Those two. I got 2 names from the Pacers on my list. Another name you mentioned, one of Kirilenko's teammates, Memo Okor. I think that's a name people forget. One of those stretch 5s at one point, his best season, he shot about 45% from the 3. Could really shoot the 3, especially in that era, was something that you had to guard. That was another wrinkle to that offense, the Utah Jazz in that era, that I remember watching, again, Lakers games. Kirilenko and Okor, 2 players that were extremely versatile, that was giving teams problems all in that era. Those were some really to have both of them on the same team. They were giving fits to a lot of teams in the 2000s. And last but not least, the Uncle Drew before Uncle Drew, the certified walking bucket, any given night could give it to you, and was going to drop 8 assists here and there easy. Andre Miller. Man, I love that Joker's game.
Watts legend. Watts up. He from Watts. Man, Watts up.
Andre Miller, man, one of the best point guards as well. Had a post game, and one of the point guards that he was pretty much the Paul Pierce, the Luka Doncic of the world of in the point guard position. He moved at whatever pace he wanted to move at, and you could not stop him. Andre Miller was not the fastest, most quickest, not the most explosive. He wasn't doing a lot of posters and from end to end, he got down the court in 2 seconds. You couldn't stop Andre Miller though. You couldn't stop Andre Miller, bro. And it was efficient too a lot of times. At 33 years old, he had a 52 piece and shot 71%.
Man, that's what I'm saying.
71% or 52. He's 70.
And one of the best lob throwers too. He could throw a lob anywhere.
Beautiful. And that game, he had 52 at 33 years old. It was only 1-3. That's a lot of. That's a lot of.
He getting to it. Dre was getting to it, man. Shout out to Dre.
There's
Legend.
a lot of midi work. That's a lot of post up work and mixing in some layups in there. Andre Miller, if you don't know about him, check him out. Biggest what ifs. What comes to mind for you as the biggest what ifs in the 2000s?
Let's see. I got 5 right off the rip. What if Nash never gets traded to Phoenix?
When you mentioned Nash earlier, that's exactly what was on my mind. What if he doesn't leave that Mavs team? Him, Finley, and Nowitzki, they were balling, but I'll let you.
They really were. Yes, they were. I got another one. Hit that 3 in Game 5 of the 2003 second round against the Spurs with the Lakers, where the ball rimmed in and out. And it came out, everyone was still kind of holding their breath because they remember what he did last year against Sacramento. And that really changed the Lakers because it was a 2-2 series. Then the Lakers go home for Game 6. But the ball just didn't, it just rimmed in and out. Kobe had the ball. He got doubled in the corner, made the right play. He pump fake, threw it. Robert Horry caught it in rhythm, wide open, and it just didn't go in. And that changed it. And the Lakers couldn't recover emotionally from that. 2000 Western Conference Finals. What if the Blazers end up winning? You got to think about it. The Lakers were the favorites with Kobe and Shaq. That was their third Western Conference Finals they had been in, or something like that, or second or third in a few years. 98, 99, and 2000. You know what I mean? So they kind of were falling back. I was Shaq's, fourth year there. He was the MVP of the league, All-Star Game MVP, led the league in scoring, but then here you find yourself. And they almost blew a 3-1 lead. They were up in that series and let them come back. So what if they win that? What if the NBA kept a composite ball in 2006, 2007 instead of going back to the leather one? I think about that. You know what I mean? Because remember, guys were saying it was cutting their fingers. And, I remember Kobe was like, no, that's not true. That's not happening. Like, it was affecting the way guys shot the ball. And Kobe was just like, well, if you couldn't make shots before, this ball isn't, that's not the problem. You need to fix it. But guys like Steve Nash, right? He used to lick his fingers a lot. See, even when the ball would hit the net, it wouldn't go through because it wasn't leather. You know what I mean? It kind of would roll in the net, and it did this weird thing. You know what I mean? So it just wasn't the same. And what if the NBA kept it to where you can still go from high school to the pros? What if they kept that? They end up stopping it, I think, after 04, 05, which is the Al Jeffersons and Gerald Greens and Lou Williams and all those guys. What if the NBA was like, you know what? Let's still get to it. And then one last one, just honorable mention, the dress code. I just was thinking outside of basketball a little bit. What if they leave it alone? You had the whole Atlanta kind of thing coming in at that time. What was that going to look like? You had dudes coming like they was going to court. You know what I mean? Every game. But what if they were able to let them, kind of pull up in the white tees and, with the Jeezy Snowman shirts and stuff like that? That would have been fun. You know what I mean? But I get they were trying to clean it up, especially after the Malice in the Palace.
That changed a bunch of everything in the NBA. The Malice at the Palace changed a whole lot. Those are some good what ifs for sure. I'll throw some out there. I have what if Amari, and Dial, what if they ain't lead a bench that year in the playoffs? I think that's another team. The Suns.
07.
I don't know if they win the finals, but they definitely could have been in the finals. Both of those years that Steve Nash won MVP, it was some controversial things that happened for the Phoenix Suns that could have changed it. What if Shaq and Kobe stayed together? That's one I always will stand on and scream from the mountaintops. They break the record of what the Bulls did. Kobe and Shaq stay together. Phil's going to stay there. You got Derek Fisher, and you really could just from there on move ancillary pieces around them. Nobody was stopping Kobe and Shaq. They win 6, 8. They do what the Heat was talking about. Not 3, not 4, not 5. If Kobe and Shaq stay together, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6. They would have had to change rules or something. It would have been some stuff changing in the league for sure. You would have seen them just going down the street drafting big people. Like you look like you could guard Shaq. It would have changed everything completely. What if Tim Duncan joined the Magic? Grant Hill, Timmy, Tracy McGrady. That probably really would have been free agent wise. I think that would have been like one of the first iterations of a big three, free agent wise, not naturally grown, not through draft or whatnot, or trades that end up happening and stuff like that. Because obviously, Celtics with Bird, Parrish, and McHale and Walton was crazy teams. But I'm talking about in that era. Yeah, that would have been one of the first iterations of a big three. And I don't know what that does for Tim Duncan's career. I think as good as he is and as great as he was, part of his success was being in a great organization. I don't know if we can call the Orlando Magic at that time a great organization, especially when rumored, allegedly, the reason why he didn't end up on the Magic because Doc didn't want to let his wife get on the team playing. Doesn't sound like a top tier organization to me. He, of course, has denied it, but I don't think that story just came out of nowhere. Also, talking about losing players, what if the Suns didn't lose Joe Johnson? They lowballed him. He wanted a bigger role, but more than anything, he wanted more paper. They lowballed him. The Hawks sent over that $70 million contract, I believe it was. And I don't know the number that they sent Joe, but it was so low. Joe asked the Suns, don't match it, please. I don't want to come back. Y'all was disrespectful. This offer that y'all sent was nasty. Don't match it. Please don't match it. Just let me go. What if they keep him? Steve Nash what if they kept him? Sean Marion and Joe Johnson, who once we saw he went to Atlanta, wasn't a lot of winning as much as the Suns, but Joe was getting busy. ISO Joe was getting busy.
Yeah, they really like dismantled that 03, 04 Phoenix team, because they still had Q Rich was over there, I think, or 04, 05. He ended up coming over there from the Clippers, unless he was there already. But then, because they had Marbury in 02, 03. So then, a little bit after that, then they were able to get Nash. So yeah, if they stick that together with Amari, man, you get your perimeter scorer, you got your defenders. Remember, Sean Marion, the Matrix, was always an all-star. You know what I mean? Throughout that tenure, he always made the all-star team because he's a multi-time all-star in the 2000s. And people forget that, but he always was going to be there no matter what.
Hey, throw a name out there. I didn't. You probably knew because your basketball knowledge is vast. But I ain't know Smush Parker was on that team. Smush Parker.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, because he was in Cleveland before that. And then that's how he ended up getting to the Lakers to 05, 06.
Yeah, he wasn't like playing major minutes, but Smush Parker was on that team.
Nah.
That was Barbosa, Joe Johnson, Barbosa, Jim Jackson. That was a night. Yeah, they should have figured that out. They should have figured that out. Q Rich, that was a deep team. You had Q Rich, Jim Jackson, Barbosa, Joe Johnson, Sean Marion, and then of course you had Amare, and then you probably would just get a little bit more depth at your big position, especially now that we know later on Amari gets injured and whatnot. But hey, these teams sometimes be messing up when it comes to the money aspect. And of course, 2015 finals. What if Kyrie and K Love play? What if Kyrie and Kevin Love play in the 2015 finals? The second best player for the Cavs that year in the finals was Matthew Dellavedova, Delly. And they was able to push it to 6. So imagine if they had Kyrie and Kevin Love. They was able to push it to 6 with Delly as the second best player for the Cavs. And I think obviously when you look at the tentacles that could come from that, what does that mean for LeBron's legacy as well? They get that's another title added to him. What does it do for his legacy, which we know is obviously always at the forefront of his mind and the narrative that is going on? I want to ask you this, one of the what ifs. What if Harden never left OKC? What if Harden never left OKC? What does that do for Harden? What does that do for the Thunder?
I think they win. They're able to win at least one or two. You know, they spent that whole time after he left trying to replace him with different players. If you think they tried to go after Kevin Martin, and then you go get Reggie Jackson, and then you get Jeremy Lamb. So you're getting all these guys to fill what James did. But James was a starter in this league no matter what. You know, he was going to be who he was going to be. So it was just going to be hard for them to, kind of cover everything that he did, because people forget not just the scoring, that punch that he gave off the bench, but the facilitating that he gave. That was one of the things that helped that team flow so well. Those two playoff runs they had in 2000, and 10, and obviously 11 and 12. Those three runs.
Yeah, that's one of the players that is not replaceable. You got to change up what you're doing with your team then, because you're not going to find a replacement for the Hartons, the KDs, or the Russell Westbrook of the world. That just doesn't happen, at least not immediately. That might be years down the road where you end up getting SGA in a trade. It was that long before we saw something of that magnitude again for OKC Thunder. Finishing off this episode, right? In the 2000s, what come to mind for you are some of the biggest draft mistakes? Before you go, I want to get mine out here just in case you have it on your list. I just want to get one. Just want to get one out there. The Pistons drafting Darko Milicic over D Wade, Carmelo, and Bosh. One of those three, I think, work. One of those three, I think, would suffice if you drafted one of them. And because you went with Milicic that following season, in the long run, because I think they won that year when they drafted Milicic, but he didn't really play. He wasn't an impact player for that team when they won. But you get Sheed the next year. You might not need to get Sheed next year if you end up having Bosh or Melo on the team, for example. Mm-hmm. You add Dwayne Wade as another option. Like, one of those three could work. Just one of those three. but you go ahead.
Let's see. I had Michael Redd, like him getting drafted so late. I'm mistaken. He was 43rd, in the draft. If they would have known what Michael Redd was going to be, now, like at that time, he probably would have got selected way earlier. Another sneaky one I had was Jamario Moon. He was drafted, if I'm not mistaken, like 2001, or went undrafted in 2001, and then he went overseas, and then he was a Harlem Globetrotter, I remember. But then he came into the league when he went to Cleveland, and he was a defender. He was a slasher. He really was super athletic, and he helped out a lot. He always contributed to winning for them. Andrea Bargnani is another one I think of. Number one pick in the 06 draft. I get what they were trying to do, but that really didn't work out. Another sleeper pick who I thought was going to be better, and they picked him so high, was Rodney Carney. I remember watching him at the McDonald's All-American game back then. It was a super underrated player, very athletic. He could shoot. He almost reminded me of like Rudy Gay almost, but I used to be super high on Rodney Carney. And he went to Philadelphia, and they already had Iggy, so it was almost like AI, C-Webb. I believe at the time C-Webb was there, and then obviously you had Iggy, and then you had Rodney Carney, and they were going to kind of do it up. And then Jason Maxiell. If they would have known he would have been that strong of a defender, a slasher, or not more a slasher, but just a defender and like a motor for the team post Ben Wallace, I feel like he would have got picked a little bit earlier because he was almost kind of picked to kind of absolve what Ben Wallace had left, which was going to be hard to do. But I mean, he played with Ben Wallace for a couple seasons, so he played behind him, but he was still, once Ben Wallace left, he was their starting 4-man, their starting 5-man. And I'll never forget, I think it was like don't quote me on this, you might be able to find a highlight. They were playing against the Hornets, and Chris Paul did the pick and roll with Tyson Chandler, and Tyson Chandler drove, and Chris Paul threw a lob to Tyson Chandler, and Jason Maxiell like jumped in midair and timed it perfectly and like just met him at the rim, and then he obliterated the ball. So if you can find that clip, that'll be fire. But it's just something that always sticks in my mind when I think of Jason Maxiell. It almost was like a precursor to what you see with Stewie. You know what I mean? Just rugged. He embodied the whole culture, D-Town. You know what I mean? He was one of them ones. You know what I mean? So shout out to Jason Maxiell.
That's a great name right there. Definitely a forgotten name, I think, by most people in the NBA community, unless you was locked in with the Pistons during that era. I'll throw out a couple more draft mistakes. The Hawks, they decided in 2005 to draft Marvin Williams. Now, this is not any shade to Marvin Williams. Marvin Williams had a pretty solid career. Coming from North Carolina, what he did at North Carolina, I would understand drafting him. But specifically on that team, the Hawks had Joe Johnson, Al Harrington, Josh Smith. Why not add a generational point guard in Chris Paul or Darren Williams? With Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, and Al Harrington, you drafted Marvin Williams at a position you kind of already had. No disrespect again to Marvin Williams, but why not? Imagine CP3 playing with this team. CP3 probably, I don't know if he'll actually get the record, but maybe he has more assists having to be able to start off with Joe Johnson, pick and pop Al Harrington, Josh Smith, the alley-oop lob, and obviously, he was able to stretch it out here and there, shooting about 35% from three. That would have been crazy. Or D Will as another scoring option to be able to create on his own, to take a little bit off of ISO Joe's back, where he didn't have to always try to figure it out. Y'all had to deal with that backcourt of D Will, big body, strong guard, with Joe Johnson. Each could give you 25 at any point. Hawks.
Bad scouting, man. Bad scouting.
And now they talking about getting rid of Trae Young next year, which I'm not saying he's like this great player, but pay the man. Pay the man. Y'all don't get stars that just want to come there, even though it's a great city. It's a great city. Really good city. Really good food. But your organization does not lure players that want to come there. And the last one, the T-Wolves, they drafted Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn.
Johnny Flynn.
To pass on Steph Curry in 2009. Like, you drafted Ricky Rubio. I could see Ricky Rubio, floor general. Johnny Flynn, you're feeling yourself after what he did over at Syracuse and how everything's been going on. No. Fine, take Rubio. Take one of them. But you don't get the man that was just at Davidson. Like, cool, you was off the hype of what Johnny Flynn did in college. You didn't believe none of the hype of what Steph did at Davidson to add to that mix?
Just bad scouting, bro. Bad scouting.
And to your point, you mentioned him, Michael Redd. That year, one of the teams that could have used him because he was drafted second round, but I think the Clippers drafted Darius Miles a little too high when you had Michael Redd on the board still, Hedo Turkoglu, and one of my favorite players of all time, Jamal Crawford, was still on the board.
Yeah, that's right. He still was there.
Either of those picks, I think, would have been a better pick for the Clippers. For you, ending off the show, who do you feel was the best point guard in that era? 2000s.
2000s, Jason Kidd. I think he was the best one.
I got J Kidd on my list too. Best shooting guard you. Never mind. I'm not even going to waste time with that. Kobe, best shooting guard. All right, cool. Best small forward.
Oh, you picked I was gonna pick somebody else.
Yeah,
No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
I know darn well he wasn't thinking nobody else. Best small forward,
T-Mac.
T-Mac. Best power forward in that era.
Tim Duncan.
That's another gimme one. And then center is Shaq. So the power forward,
Yeah.
center, and the shooting guard position, I think is
Shooting
pretty
guard.
much locked in. Point guard,
Yeah.
you could have went with Steve Nash, possibly CP3 coming in.
He was second.
Tony Parker.
I had Nash, Iverson, LeBron, KG, and Yao. That was my second team of the 2000s.
D Wade obviously was in that era too. You might want to throw
Yeah.
D Wade in the events. Might want to show some love to Paul Pierce.
Yep. Another one.
Powell was even in that area. C Webb, one of my favorite players in that era.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about all time though, of the power forwards, right? I heard Austin Rivers was having this discussion, and it got me thinking as well within that discussion. When we mention all-time power forwards, not even this era, but all-time power forwards, typically people have some iteration of Tim Duncan. Obviously, that's etched in. That's not a discussion. Tim Duncan. Then from there, you'll have KG, you'll have Dirk, you'll have Malone in that mix. Obviously, some of the modern players now, Giannis is in the conversation going up there. Do you feel that Dirk should be higher on the list, higher than KG? Because some people have, for example, is Timmy, and then number 2 they'll say KG, and third will be Dirk. Do you feel Dirk should actually be higher on the list regarding all-time power forwards?
You know what? Honestly, I think he's good where he's at. You know what I mean? Like, because he always had during that time a good teammate. You know what I mean? Having Steve Nash and everything, he had to kind of get set up in a way. But Nash has such a gravitational pull, then he ends up playing with J Kidd. And I hate penalizing players for who they play with. But that's just what it is. You know what I mean? But he did win a lot more than KG did during that time for about a season or two, if you want to count that. But I don't think a lot of people are going to live down 06, 07 when they lost in the first round. I think that's kind of like a stain that people are like, well, nah, he didn't get it done. You know what I mean? But Dirk was a bad dude. Like, you know what I mean? Outside of the guys who weren't from America, he was the guy. I mean, he was an all-star in 2002, and he was just an all-star moving forward from there, but I would say KG, he lived up to all the hype. He had the intensity. He had Minnesota on his back. And he was carrying that team, whatever point guard they had, whether it was Steph, Terrell Brandon, Chauncey, Fred Hoiberg, whomever, like he was making it work. Troy Hudson, even, like, you know what I mean? He was making it work. But yeah, I think they're properly ranked if you go Timmy, KG, Dirk, and then kind of down the line right there.
Only thing I'll give Dirk over KG is his ring. I think is a weightier ring than that Celtics one, because the ring that Dirk got, the path to get there a little bit harder, the roster little bit less talented. You had you had 3 other Hall of Famers with you. Not to knock, you didn't choose, you didn't make the team, but in regards of weighing those titles, KG, Paul Pierce, Rondo, Ray Allen. Dirk didn't have that on that roster. He did not have that on that roster. So I just give Dirk that in that regard. That ring, amongst when we discuss like the best titles, that one is top 3, top 5 best titles in this modern era. I can't say all time because I don't know what George Mikan did to get his ring for the Minneapolis Lakers. I don't know what the battle was.
This is why we got to do it for. This is what that you see. That's always what I say. Only people you saw.
It's a clip coming out sometime next week. Rush literally mentions that. Rush was like, "Yo, I'm from the Chris Lindsey Hoop School. I go by who I've seen."
My dog. He knows. That's what I'm saying. That change that there adds a little bit more nuance. Don't be in your mid-30s telling me about Magic Johnson, because that's crazy. That don't make no sense. With all due respect, though. But yeah,
I get people doing their research and studying and whatnot, but on some level, like, I respect what Mikal did. I can't really speak fully to it. I've done the research. I know Mikal and Bird and Kevin Johnson and James Worthy and Michael Cooper. I know about all of them. I don't know if I'm versed enough to really speak on how hard it was for them doing that there, or to really have them in my top 5 and things of that nature. But that's a whole nother discussion. That is our episode for the 2000s right there. Like, share, subscribe. You know the vibes. If you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready. Bench Mob, we out. Peace.
Peace.